Prisons are supposed to be places of order, accountability, control. Behind thick concrete walls and steel doors, every movement is monitored, every conversation logged, every moment accounted for. But in one women's correctional facility tucked away in the southern United States, something happened that the system couldn't explain, or didn't want to. Her name was Marissa Daniels, 26 years old, serving a short sentence on a nonviolent charge. By all accounts, quiet, respectful, cooperative. She was the kind of inmate that didn't raise alarms. But then she turned up pregnant. No conjugal visits, no outside contact. The question wasn't just how, but who. And just weeks after that discovery, she was gone. Found lifeless in her cell in the early hours of a Monday morning. No note, no signs of a struggle, just silence. And a baby that would never be born. The official report called it self-inflicted, case closed. But for those who knew her, that explanation never sat right. And as investigators began asking questions, an unsettling picture began to take shape. One that pointed not outward, but within the very institution meant to protect her. A uniformed officer, a chain of ignored complaints, a warning system that failed, or was never meant to work at all. This isn't just the story of a prison scandal. It's the story of a young woman who believed she was almost free, only to find herself trapped in a place where secrets were kept and some lives didn't matter as much as others. Before we continue, if you care about stories that expose what happens behind locked doors, subscribe to the channel. Like this video if you believe the truth matters. And tell us in the comments, what city are you watching from? We read every single one. Her name was Marissa Daniels, just 26 years old. She was serving the final stretch of a 2-year sentence inside Lone Pines Correctional Facility, a medium-security prison tucked into a quiet rural corner of Texas. The year was 2022, and according to her file, she was on track for early release. Good behavior, no infractions, no issues with staff or other inmates. Nothing about her stood out, until the day a medical intake flagged something that should have been impossible. Pregnant. Nearly 5 months along. No visitations, no furloughs, no contact with the outside world for over a year. The prison launched an internal review, but within weeks, Marissa was dead. Found inside her cell. Early morning. No note. No one heard a thing. The guard on duty that night, the same man who had been quietly reassigned 2 years earlier after another female inmate, came forward with allegations that were later dismissed for lack of evidence. This wasn't the first time this guard crossed the line, and what happened inside those prison walls has left a trail of silence, secrets, and scandal that someone tried very hard to keep buried. Marissa Leanne Daniels was 26 years old. A daughter, a sister, a mother to a little boy she hadn't held in nearly 18 months. Before she wore state-issued clothing and answered to a number, she worked the morning shift at a diner just outside Dallas. Every day she clocked in at 6 a.m. sharp and didn't leave until the last pot of coffee was rinsed and the floor was swept clean. She wasn't rich, she wasn't famous, but she mattered to the people who loved her. Her record, clean until the summer of 2020, a charge for possession with intent to distribute, pills, found in her car. She told police they weren't hers. She took the plea anyway, 2 years, county time served, and transferred to Lone Pines Correctional for the remainder. It was supposed to be a mistake she could survive, a moment that wouldn't define the rest of her life. She was counting down the days, and she was only a few months away from going home. Lone Pines Correctional was one of those places people drove past without noticing, surrounded by open fields, barbed wire, and the kind of silence that stretches across miles. The buildings were old, the staff was overworked, fewer female officers than there should have been, More blind corners than anyone wanted to admit. It was a place where things didn't always go according to policy, but somehow still made it onto the logbooks as normal. In that setting, Marissa kept to herself. She read. She wrote letters to her son. She played cards with two other inmates she trusted. She didn't get into fights, didn't argue with guards, didn't complain. But slowly her name started coming up, quietly, in whispers, in passing remarks. She was seen talking to one of the correctional officers more than usual, Officer Sean Brooks, 39 years old, former Army MP. On paper, his record was clean, commendations for discipline, de-escalation, and overtime. But ask around and you'd get a different picture. Inmates described him as watchful. Some said he stared too long. Others said he knew how to say just enough to make you feel seen or threatened, depending on the day. No official complaints had ever stuck. One inmate wrote a note about him back in 2019. It went missing from her file. Another refused to speak to internal affairs after being placed in solitary for disruptive behavior. It was hard to prove anything in Lone Pines, and harder still to make anyone listen. Marissa wasn't loud about it. She didn't call attention to herself. But something changed. Her usual routines shifted. She stopped showing up for certain work details. She stopped writing home as often. And the other inmates, those who used to sit with her, noticed the distance. Whatever was happening, it was happening quietly, slowly, in a place where silence could be mistaken for safety. But no one, not even Marissa, could have predicted what was coming next. The first sign that something was wrong came from the infirmary. A nurse noticed it during a routine exam. Nothing major. Just a complaint about fatigue, then nausea. The same symptoms other inmates faked when they wanted a break from work detail. But this wasn't an act. A test confirmed it. Marissa Daniels was pregnant, 5 months along. That information never made it into the general logs. Not right away. The nurse submitted a private report to her supervisor requesting further evaluation. But the request stalled, and so did the response. Word got around fast, not from official channels, but from whispers in the yard, hushed exchanges between bunks, knowing glances at mealtime. Everyone knew conjugal visits were off the table, which meant the obvious question was being asked behind every closed door. Who was the father? Marissa changed. The quiet girl who read books and wrote letters had started to withdraw even more. She stopped making eye contact. She avoided the cafeteria on high-traffic days, and the only person she seemed to speak to was Officer Sean Brooks. He had changed his patrol schedule just a week before the pregnancy was discovered. Nights instead of days. He volunteered for shifts that placed him near Marissa's housing unit, a section with limited surveillance coverage, one camera facing the hall, none inside the cells. There were rumors of a late-night pattern. Inmates claimed he walked certain halls when he didn't need to, that Marissa's door sometimes stayed open a few minutes longer than policy allowed, that she was seen slipping folded notes into her pocket during morning lineup, notes that were later burned in the laundry room trash bin. There's no evidence of physical threats, no formal complaints from Marissa. But silence in a prison isn't always consent, and in a place like Lone Pines, power isn't always loud. In the weeks that followed, Officer Brooks grew more visible, on the surface, friendly with other staff, making jokes, helping with inventory. But behind the scenes, small things began to disappear. Logs went missing, camera footage was overwritten, and one inmate who claimed to overhear something was suddenly transferred without explanation. Brooks also accessed the prison's internal database over 24 times, always after hours, always focused on files belonging to inmates in Marissa's block. When questioned later, he said he was reviewing disciplinary histories, but no notes were added, no changes recorded, just open files, closed screens, no trace. Then it happened, a Monday morning. March 14, 2022, the first shift officer walked into B Wing at 5:47 a.m. The air was still. The unit was quiet. Most inmates still asleep. But Marissa's cell wasn't like the others. She was found hanging from a bedsheet tied to the upper rail. No movement, no signs of life, no struggle. There was no note, no farewell, just a folded towel on the bed, and a sealed envelope with no writing on it. The report listed her death as suicide. Fast, clean, tragic. But something was off. Staff who'd seen her the day before said she didn't seem distressed. She talked about her son. She asked about early release paperwork and the sheet she was found with. It had been checked out to a different inmate just days earlier. The autopsy was conducted quietly, but when the results came back, the coroner had no choice but to report it. Marissa was just over 5 months pregnant. The fetus showed signs of stress, but no physical trauma. What it did show was timing. Conception placed around the same period when Officer Brooks switched to night patrols. But it wasn't just the baby that raised red flags. It was what investigators found in the surveillance footage that changed everything. As the investigation deepened, one thing became clear. The prison was trying to bury this story. Surveillance footage from the night of Marissa's death had been flagged as corrupted. Multiple cameras malfunctioning, including the one closest to her cell. It was a coincidence that raised eyebrows. Was it really malfunction, or had the footage been tampered with? 2 inmates who had been in the same block as Marissa came forward shortly after the news of her death. Both claimed to have witnessed unusual behavior in the days leading up to the tragedy. One described seeing Officer Brooks entering Marissa's cell late at night. She said she'd heard whispers from the shadows, a conversation she couldn't make out but knew enough to identify the voices. The second inmate described strange late-night patrols, and Marissa acting distant, but her testimony came with a price. She was transferred the very next day to a facility miles away. The first inmate, who had courageously shared her account, was pressured to recant her statement. She was told the investigation had concluded and that any claims would only lead to trouble for her. Within days, she withdrew her testimony. No one at Lone Pines seemed to want her version of the story out in the open. But what no one had counted on was Marissa's journal, a small, tattered notebook discovered hidden in her personal belongings after her death. It was the kind of journal most prisoners kept, pages filled with daily entries, reflections on life behind bars, dreams of freedom. But among the pages were cryptic lines, fragments of sentences, words that didn't fit the rest of the writing. The name Brooks was circled repeatedly, and in several places phrases like, "too scared to speak," "he won't leave me alone," and "what happens if I tell" were scratched into the pages with desperation. The journal didn't just hint at a troubled relationship, it spoke of fear, of being watched, of silence and intimidation. But it wasn't until investigators dug deeper into Officer Brooks's history that the true depth of the scandal came to light. 3 years earlier, another inmate had made an allegation about Officer Brooks. She claimed he had tried to force her into a corner, offered promises of favors, and then threatened her with consequences if she refused. That woman's case was swiftly dismissed. No evidence, no witnesses. The allegations were quietly buried under paperwork, another failed investigation. What was beginning to emerge wasn't just a story of abuse, it was a pattern, one that stretched years, a pattern of manipulation, silence, and intimidation. And then came the most chilling discovery. Brooks didn't just have a past, he had a future. He had been planning his next move. The last entry in Marissa's journal didn't mention her baby or her upcoming release. It mentioned him, Officer Brooks. But this time the words were different. "I'm scared he will do something to me. He'll silence me for good." The guard wasn't just her abuser. He might have been the one who silenced her forever. But what the investigators didn't know, what the world didn't know, was just how far Officer Brooks was willing to go to keep his secrets buried. In the weeks following Marissa's death, Officer Sean Brooks quietly resigned from his position. No official statement was made, no questions were answered. He simply disappeared. His resignation came just days before he was scheduled to be interviewed by investigators. No reason was given. No further investigation was launched. The Department of Corrections officially labeled the case as insufficient evidence, claiming they had no grounds to pursue criminal charges. Internal Affairs concluded there was no actionable misconduct, despite the mounting allegations against him, the corrupted footage, and the disturbing journal entries left behind by Marissa. It wasn't until Marissa's mother, Marissa Daniels, took matters into her own hands that the case regained some public attention. She filed a wrongful death lawsuit against both the prison and Officer Brooks. The suit claimed that her daughter's death was not a suicide, but a tragic consequence of neglect, abuse, and a cover-up by the facility. The prison system fought back, offering no real answers. In response, the Department of Corrections issued a generic statement expressing deep sympathy for the loss, while refusing to comment on the specifics of the case. Meanwhile, the lawsuit dragged on. In a shocking turn, just months after the case began to garner media attention, the civil suit was settled out of court. No admission of guilt, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just a payout, one that couldn't bring back Marissa or bring justice for the baby she was carrying. And despite all the evidence that had come to light, Lone Pines Correctional Facility continues to operate under the same leadership, the same practices, the same lack of oversight that allowed abuse to fester in the shadows, unchallenged and unchecked. To this day, no one has been held accountable for Marissa's death or the life she was carrying. Now, we want to hear from you. Do you think justice was served in this case? Was Marissa failed by the system, or was her death orchestrated by someone who held all the power? Should prison guards face harsher penalties for abuse of power? And if this was your sister, your daughter, your loved one, what would you want done? We cover stories like this every week. If you want to stay informed and never miss an update, make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We want to know what you think. This case, the system, the truth. Your voice matters. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more true crime stories coming your way.